Welcome everybody to this fireside chat on product management. Um, I'm not sure if you've heard about MEMPC, but if you haven't, we are a consortium of Master of Engineering Management programs with 9 programs from some of the leading US universities as part of the consortium. And then one of our goals is to increase awareness about the Master of Engineering Management degree. The degree has been around for a while, but we are still relatively unknown just because of the cohort sizes that we graduate every year. So one of the goals for the consortium is to raise visibility and awareness and let the prospective students and future engineering leaders at least know about the degree so they can make a choice when they're thinking about graduate education. Fireside Chat is just one way of showcasing the degree by showcasing our alumni and the wonderful faculty we have across our programs. And we try to choose topics of interest to the current students, but also to prospective students, just as a way to show the versatility of the degree and the strength of our alumni base. So welcome again today. The topic for today is product management. And as you can see, we have a surprise guest with us as a panelist. And I will let our panelists introduce themselves and we'll get started with this fireside chat. JJ, would you like to go first? Please.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm JJ Rorie. I am a lecturer and faculty at Johns Hopkins University. I also have an advisory coaching and training firm called Great Product Management that I own and run. Author of a book called Immutable, 5 Truths of Great Product Managers, and also host a podcast called Product Voices. So I've been in product management a long time. So I'm very excited to be on this panel and talk about this topic.
Thank you so much. Jigar, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks, Ritu. So, hi, everyone. I'm Jigar. I'm a senior product manager right now at Asana. Before this, I've spent 3 years building softwares in fintech. I've built software for financial advisors. I'm a Johns Hopkins alum. I graduated in December 19. And prior to MEM, I've been an engineer. I've been a sales guy. I've been a solutions engineer. And never knew that I was kind of preparing myself to become a PM. And I guess we have the rest of the conversation to talk about that. But nice to meet you all and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Jigar. Olha?
Hi, everyone. My name is Olga. I'm same as Jigar, the Johns Hopkins alumni. I graduated in 2021 with engineering management degree, and currently I'm a product manager at Fanatics Commerce, supporting everything and all about the technology behind the e-commerce domain. Before that, I did get my bachelor degree in software engineering. I go straight into the engineering. I always thought, I want to be a PM. So I think engineering management is what helped me get there. And I'm excited to talk about that more.
Perfect. Welcome all of you on this fireside chat. For all of the attendees, just as a matter of logistics, we are going to have Q&A towards the end of the session. So if you have any questions, if you wouldn't mind typing it out in the Q&A box so we can keep track of the questions, and then we can get to them once we are done with the conversation part of it. So let's get started. Product management, and this is for all of you, and I'm going to just start the conversation, and I want this to be a conversation, an organic conversation as we go on. But product management seems to be the buzzword. Like everybody who joins MEM wants to be a product manager. So I'm very curious, like what is product management, and what does a product manager do, to be fair?
Want me to start that?
Please.
Anybody else want to start? Okay. Yeah, I mentioned that I've been in product management for a long time, and it's been around. I guess if you trace the history, it's been around since probably 80, 90 years now. The first kind of iterations of it were really brand people in the consumer packaged goods industry. But what's happened over the last, I'll say 20 years, but really it's more in this last decade, 5 to 10 years. There's a ton of visibility as technology changed the world, right? The technology companies started to grow and have so much influence. And so product management is so highly visible right now. And it really, at the crux of it, hasn't changed that much. If you really look at what we do, although it's very different in how we do it and the ability that we have. But product management is essentially the function within any business that is responsible for, of course, building the products and maintaining the products. But more important than that, the first step of that is understanding the markets, understanding customers, understanding the problems that are out there, and how we as a company are uniquely positioned to create solutions to solve those problems. So product management isn't really only a business function, and it's not really only an engineering or technology function. It kind of sits at the intersection of those two, and it's important to understand both. But at the end of the day, it's really about understanding the market problems, and then working with the cross-functional team to put unique solutions out into market. So that's kind of how I define product management. I'd love to hear Jigar and Oha's take on their definition. The interesting thing is there's not one universal definition of this is product management. So I'd love to hear your perspectives as well.
I think, I agree with everything you said, JJ, but like, I think if building off of that, if you just take it one level meta, like the way I've always looked at it is it's the most entrepreneurial job you can have. It's a function that evolves depending on the organization you are in, the marketplace you are in, the maturity of the user that you're in, the team that you have, the kind of projects that you have. So it requires, like, I think one of the most open-minded and open to change personalities to look at a situation, provide certainty to team members while you're, as you said, like looking at a problem, analyzing that, and driving to a solution. But to me, my one-word definition most of the times have been it's one of the most entrepreneurial jobs, and you can unpack entrepreneurship and what that is. Or another one-word definition that I generally go with is, my job or our job is to provide certainty at every stage and help users, business, teams to make the right next decision. Those are like just two other lenses that I look at it.
I love that last one. That's spot on.
I also really like the entrepreneurial link to the product management job. And I think in addition to that, I would say that when we talk about responsibilities of a product manager, I think the word that strikes me the most is responsibility, and essentially being responsible for the product. So I think that's kind of like a high level, like the way you can look at it. If you're responsible for anything, everything that goes in it, defining the success metric and what does it even mean to have a successful product, right? And then working with the tech, working with operations, working with marketing, working with customers, working with everyone to make sure you and your team get to that point. And when the product is not doing well, it's your responsibility. And when the product is doing well, it's your responsibility. So your job is really to make sure you can encompass all of that and become this center for everyone to come with questions to, as Jigar said, bring clarity and kind of like move forward and make sure the team, has great momentum to keep going. So sometimes it's a challenging part of that you are the person who is responsible, who needs to maintain the momentum, and everyone comes to you. But I think that's also the entrepreneur and beneficial kind of like, part of the job.
That's so right. And one of the difficult things about it is, and rewarding things about it is, we're not necessarily the ones who do everything. In fact, we shouldn't be the one who do everything, even though there's a huge entrepreneurial, and I love that connection because I've seen so many product managers go on to be very successful entrepreneurs and vice versa. But we shouldn't be the ones doing everything. But at the end of the day, people come to us, right? And so we have to have this influence of others, even while we don't manage them, right? And so there's this leadership and influence and the skill that has to be really honed in order to get things done and to put us in a position as a team to make the right next decision, as Jigar said. So it is a fun role, that's for sure. It's not easy, but it's fun.
Sounds like it. So it sounds like it's a very big picture thinking role, but then also a role that requires you to take that big picture and break it down into smaller steps, right? So maybe like if you're getting uncertainty thrown at you, you are the filter to switch that uncertainty to a certain level of steps or requirements or whatever be the case. Does that sound like I get that?
Yeah, I mean that reminds me of and it's a great plug to what we're trying to achieve here, but like this reminds me of something that Professor Lawrence Ehrenheim taught me in my entrepreneurship class at Hopkins. And he used to like really call me out. And I remember the entire statement was like, Jigar, think small and big at the same time. And I think it's just so easy to say and difficult to achieve. I think I still sometimes struggle, doing that, or I still sometimes do a very good job of doing it. And there's a lot of input to that, like how you can do like think big and small at the same time. But I think to what you said, Rutu, like the way I can again like tie that together is like that ability to think big and small at the same time, and say the right things to the right people and position the right things in the right way is a really, really important part of the job.
And it's I sometimes, say that product managers have to be visionaries and tacticians at the same time. It's exact same, kind of premise is that we do have to see around the corner. We do have to look at the data and kind of strip out the things that don't matter, that are making things noisy and complex. And that's hard, right? That's a very strategic kind of skill set. But then we also have to get in and get dirty and get our hands in there and make things happen. Because at the end of the day, until something brilliant is executed and put out there, it doesn't really make an impact. And so that's one of the reasons why I've always loved the role. Being in it and teaching it is because you do get to kind of dip your feet into two different, fairly, different areas of business. But that's exactly where some product teams and some product managers fall a little short, is that they're naturally biased to one or the other, and they don't hone the skills to be both. Myself, for example, I really like the strategy part of it, kind of going back to my product career and just my personality and just what I like. And by the way, ironically, I'm not an engineer. I do not have an engineering degree. And so I've always been I love the strategy. I love the business. I love the big picture. And getting into the minutia always kind of was boring to me in some ways, right? Well, you can't be a product manager with that. You've got to get into it. And so sometimes naturally we gravitate to one or the other, just based on who we are, but we still have to really get into both of them.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say that I couldn't agree more with everything that JJ and Jigar said. And I think every PM who brought like a really broad, problem that you want to solve to your engineering team at first, without, trying to break it down, trying to make it more manageable, will think twice before doing it again, because I think that's your job to show, this is what we're doing now. This is what we're doing, in 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, and showing the vision, but also showing how achievable that can be. And I think the skill that actually helps you do that is empathy and trying to emphasize with engineers, because to them, you want to build this, that's great. But for them, even the small change will, for example, I don't know, require that many, more processing power, etc., to just pull this one value onto the UI. And like, it sounds so silly, but when you get to the grits of it, you're really understanding, like why it's a very great symbiosis between engineers and PM who make great things at the end.
Yeah,
Makes so much sense.
So, and Oha, you mentioned empathy as a skill set, right? I was going to ask, like, what are the skill sets you think are necessary for a product manager to be successful? And I know JJ brought in the part that her background is not necessarily an engineering background, but the skill sets she brings in are very complementary and very necessary for a product manager role. So what are some of the other skill sets that you've noticed based on your experience and your expertise that are required for a product manager to be successful?
I can keep building on since I started talking about the empathy. I think that's a really good one. And sometimes it's not a challenge. It's a challenging one because you cannot really measure it, and you cannot kind of like, I think you're building in mostly outside of work, maybe doing, some exercises or like building relationship with people. But work setting is really hard sometimes. And as a PM, when there's lots of pressure and everyone's expecting, deliverables from you and you're trying to be empathetic at the same time, I think that's where you're like really getting into that. So I would definitely say that this one, if you're naturally, an empathetic person, can be a great advantage in the role. And then I would say also just being able to switch context very fast. Your engineering team can work on, 3-4 features at once, but what can expand, like in 2-3 years and can be like so much more. And you're already talking about the new product and things like that. And, the goal for you is to maintain the team focused while at the same time, building future vision for whatever it is you're building. So being able to do that quickly, I think that's another one that I would call out.
Yeah, I mean, context switching, I think, is a huge one. And there's so many different ways that I think every individual would probably do it differently. Like some people like to manage things in their head. I'm one of those. Some people like to manage their calendars. Some will have like different tabs on Chrome, but just like, whatever works for you, but having that ability to like context switch and speak the right thing in front of the right audience. Like you're meeting engineering and then the marketing team and then leadership in like 1.5 hours. So having that ability and that mental strength just generally is super important. And the other, like one more thing that I would want to add to this, I think is for me, it's like, there's a list of skills, right? Like, there's going to be design, engineering, empathy, strategy. There's so much more. And JJ can give us like a great breakdown, I'm sure, with like sections there because she studied the field. But to me, like, the way to achieve that or the path to execute all of that is like ruthless proactiveness. Like, one of the most important things that I always look at, like, when I've worked with interns in the past, I've hired interns in the past, I've trained like, young PMs, and it's just generally like that. And that's one of like those core qualities, like more like values that you look at, where like, is this person like, has that ability to like, well, okay, something's wrong here. Here's a gap. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and see if I can talk to the data team that can talk to the warehouse team. I can talk to like, the floor team and figure out what that is. And that just like that ability transcends like everywhere. It's about like finding the right resource in the company to like creating the right presentation, reaching out to the clients, and also like I think it somehow also translates into your designs and the kind of technical decisions that you make. So I think like for me, it's like entrepreneurship or being entrepreneurial, which is very fuzzy if you go on the internet. And then the second thing is like just ruthless proactiveness. Like, you don't know something, you just lean in and try to figure that out. I'm okay if you like, we're not successful, but like having the ability to lean in and do it just takes you places. What place is the next question, but like it just takes you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with all of that from both of you. One of the things that led me to writing my book was that I wanted to find the skills or behaviors that were consistent in these great product managers that I had worked with over my career. I wanted to see if there was, a baseline or a foundation of things that the really successful ones did more than the others. So I went about kind of looking back on my career, doing research, et cetera. And so it ended up being kind of this, these 5 truths is what I call them. But I like what Jigar said in terms of certain skills transcend, because these skills that I ended up with really are a lattice work of foundation. And yes, they're 5 distinct things, but they work together and they work with other skills. And, the 5 that I found that were the most important, and certainly not the only skills, but the most important to lay the foundation for everything else to kind of build upon is number 1, customer intelligence. You have to be really good. And it ties a little bit to some of what you all said, which was, you got to be curious. You've got to want to know how things work. You can't just look at the surface of anything, especially customer intelligence, right? So you dig deep, you really get into the psyche and what's driving people. And then the second truth is relationship building. We don't do anything without our stakeholders, right? And so the better we are at managing those relationships and understanding having empathy for them, knowing what they care about, right? To Jigar's point about communicating, which by the way is the third truth, communicating to those different stakeholders. You don't go really high level to someone who needs the details. You don't go really detailed to someone who wants the high level. So you've got to know that, and that's that context switching that we talked about. Again, so customer intelligence, relationship building, communication. The fourth one again ties to what you all said: judgment, good judgment, decision making. Right? You've got to be able to strip out the things that don't matter. You've got to get good at understanding which decisions can be made quickly, because they're they can be rolled back. They're not that risky. You've got to understand what needs more due diligence, and doing that quickly is a skill, and it takes time. But that kind of good judgment, decision making is another one. And then my fifth skill set or immutable truth that all great product managers need is prioritization. You simply have to prioritize your time. And I talk more specifically about time. There's another skill that is how to prioritize for the product. All of these kind of pull into that, but product managers do get pulled in so many different directions, as we've talked about. There's so many stakeholders, so many people who want our time, and want our efforts, and want us to do their thing first. And so we have to be really good at saying no, and saying no to the wrong things so we can say yes to the right things. And that starts with our time. So I agree with everything. I mean, product management is a really, really highly visible and exciting role in any company, because it makes such an impact. But it takes a very diverse skill set. And I have found, again, that if you set your foundation with those, and you think about them, they're almost soft skills, right? They're not so much you got to know how to code, and you've got to know this engineering. There's certainly a lot of that skill set that you need as well. But this kind of foundation that I've found is just, it's going to help you do everything else better. It's going to help you navigate the role. And when you're having hard times, relying on those relationships, communicating well, just kind of helps along the way.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Like, I'd almost print those out and put it right in front of me, so that every time like I'm confused and looking at the ceiling,
Right.
like I should ideally get answers from one of these 5 truths.
Yeah,
I know.
I like
was
what you
did
said
you have
about
a poster about it?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I've got a lot of marketing stuff. I'll send it to you. But I like what you said about being proactive. Again, I called the book, ultimately called the book Immutable, which means, it's a little bit ironic because so much of what we do in product is changes, right? And adapting. But these were the immutable truths. Immutable, going to stay with us forever, basically.
Right.
That's what it means. These are the things that, regardless of industry, regardless of 10 years from now, 10 years ago, it's those are the things that product people are going to need to do. I almost called it intentional, or some variation of that, because we have to be very intentional. We have to be intentional with our time and our thoughts and our efforts, and proactive. And so, again, it's not one of those jobs that we can just kind of sit back and rest on our laurels and not be in the limelight, which also makes it hard, right? We really need to focus enough on making sure we're not burning out, and making sure we do take the time, and making sure we do, kind of figure out what's a healthy balance.
That sounds like a fascinating set of skill sets, and that you have to develop or have or work on if you want to be a product manager, right? So my next curious question right now is, surrounds the myth and misconceptions around the role of a product manager. Like, are there some things that you thought your role was going to be that it's not, and some things that you thought your role was not going to be but it is, before you became a product manager, if you will?
That's an interesting question. As I think about this, when you think about product management, and for some reason, when I thought, product, it seemed that the word new always came in front of it, like new product. You're building something new, you're building something exciting, you're building something very, cutting edge, new technology, new everything. So I think that was what I believed. But then as I started, getting into my job, I also understand for the companies that have been around for some time, right? There's also things like the tech has been around for, like 20 years. And this process of migrating something very complex where there are so many dependencies, so many processes and small things that just live in people's heads, not a lot of things that are documented and things like that. And you have to make something that's not, great and has not been working into something better. I think that's kind of like was a little, not that I didn't expect there's going to be an aspect of that, but that's, I think, just the reality of life, that not all the things, you'll start from scratch, you'll get into it, even if you're hired, in your new job, it's not necessarily you're building new things, you have to pick it up from someone. And so there's a baggage that comes with it. So I think that was a little bit a new learning for me, that, it's now your job, your responsibility to make it great. And it can be challenging, but I think that was just a funny insight that I had in my time at Fanatics.
Yeah, I mean, you inherit the good and bad from like previous PMs, like decisions that they've made, like tech debt, and like so many funny things there. One of the things that like I was really surprised with, like after I started, was like just goes back to what JJ said, like communication, stakeholder management. Like I think relationships and like just finding the right people in the organization is so much more table stakes. And like it is also like if I try to put a number of things, like 20% of my week is like just relationship building. You're meeting like people from different departments, talking to them about how your day is, like what's top priority for you, what are you thinking about, like. So I think I never knew that that's going to be part of the job, because I think when we try to learn it, or when you go on Medium pages, like it's so structured that this is what product management is, and like they just like the fabric underneath it is people, and we really miss that. And I also think like not a lot of that, like can also be learned by just reading. But and ironically, what I'm saying next is like my first manager told me that the only book that you need to read to become a good product manager is How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you read that and you just go into a room and like just start doing product stuff, and you'll be fine. So I think that just, yeah, I had no idea that that's going to be like a big part of my job, and it is today. And the other good good thing that like came across was people are, after a certain point, people look up to you for like the final word, the final decision. Your opinion matters. And I think I never like internalized or manifested that until like I actually started working. Because when you're studying about it or reading about it, it's like you look at the data and the macro trend and the user interview, and now you have three inputs, and looking at that, you're going to decide A, B, or C. But a lot of times the answer is like maybe A, maybe B, definitely not C. And then who's going to decide between A and B? The engineer is going to look at the designer is going to look at the data scientist. And then you need to lean in and just make that informed decision, and hope that you're right. And the team hopes that you're right. And I think that's fine. But it's a much more responsible role than I initially thought. I enjoy it, but I was definitely surprised by it.
Yeah, and I would just echo, I love both of those answers, because I was going to say two things just to kind of tie off of that to Ola's point. One of the things that folks are most surprised by, myself included way back when, but now I try to teach, it's so interesting to try to teach people who haven't been in product yet. So I've got the corporate training side, the people that are sitting in the product role. So they come in with all that baggage, right? But the folks that are in MSEM programs, et cetera, are, they're green, they have this bright eye, and so they don't know. And so I try not to dampen their spirit while still, teaching them that it's not going to be all rosy. So to Ola's point, one of the things is how incremental the innovation usually is, or often is, right? We think oftentimes that, we're going to build something from scratch, and we're going to build a rocket into space. And sometimes you literally are doing something that is boring and nothing that you would like tell all your friends at a party because you're the coolest person ever, right? But it makes such a big impact to the user, right? So the kind of incremental nature of the innovation and the product management we do is a bit of a surprise to folks. And then to Jigar's point, it's how the relationship's huge. I've hired people who just demonstrated communication and relationship building skills and had no product or engineering experience, right? And they were good in the role. But also to the point that, a lot of folks, especially engineers, and especially folks that go through grad school, have been successful in their academic career, in whatever, if they've worked, they're usually type A, successful people. They've developed a system for their life. If I do A and B and C, if I study this way, if I do this, I'm going to get this outcome. And product management's hard. Like Jigar said, like sometimes there's 2 or 3 really good options, and the data is not going to be, really, really clear that A is great and B is stupid, right? So you've got to make these decisions with some ambiguity, and that's hard for a lot of people, especially in the beginning of their career, because these people are relying on you, and all of those things. So that's another surprising thing for folks, is that there's not always, and in fact, there's very rarely like crystal clear answers of this is the direction and every other direction is wrong. That's just not how product works. And so that gets a little cumbersome and hard for people as well.
Yeah, and I can imagine as your scope increases, the level of uncertainty increases, and so your comfort level with dealing with uncertainty has to kind of grow with where you are and what you're working on.
And sometimes organizations, and every organizational culture is different. Sometimes they don't like risk. They don't like uncertainty. And a lot of organizations, another, I guess, surprise, or some things that you should be aware of going into product management, is that not all organizations understand product management and what it is, right? I think Asana is probably a good example of one that does, just because they've grown up and they do a lot of things literally for product teams. But there's a ton of successful companies, right, who don't really get what the product management craft is. And so you kind of have to fight that internal battle, as well as trying to be the best product manager you can. One example, or one way that manifests itself, is a real lack of adopting kind of a risk. Well, they're very risk averse is the way to say that, right? They don't like uncertainty. They don't want to make decisions unless they're crystal clear. That's not going to be very likely. We do everything we can. We do all of the research we can to mitigate as much risk as we can. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be some risk in product decisions. And, sometimes you've got to fight that battle internally as well, as you're yourself getting comfortable with some of that ambiguity.
Yeah, I can understand.
Sorry, I think I've like just lived that, everything that JJ described. My previous role at Adopar, like expertise and industry knowledge was appreciated. You need to be right, or you don't probably need to opine here, was the culture. To like now, 3 months into Asana, like the conversations that I have with my team is like, this is my low confidence answer, this is my medium confidence answer, this is my high confidence answer. I think just like this entire cultural shift is like just two totally different level of maturities of doing product management. And I think the 5 truths and like all the other like, skills that like Olha mentioned and a couple that I spoke about are like just really important to just make you successful in any environment. Because I think like, I imagine for like a, young PM, like it's going to be really difficult to know like, what kind of organization or culture or situation you're going to end up in. Like, you probably just want your foot in the door. That's exactly how I looked at things a few years ago. Just make me anything product, like, I'll just do it and then I figure out my way to become a PM.
Yeah, it's interesting. I worked for a large organization once where they wanted to be more entrepreneurial, but their motto was, give me the next $1 billion idea. And I'm like, well, if it's $1 billion idea, it's not entrepreneurial at this point. It has probably gone way past entrepreneurship, but that was always an interesting. So the risk-averse culture, in that sense, I can totally imagine how it can hinder getting to a good product. And we've seen companies rise and fall on good products or bad products, however be it. One of the questions I had, and this is going back to your current roles and what you're working on, what is one of the most exciting and challenging aspects of your roles right now? that you can share with us? Or something that you love the most about your role?
I think I can start with that. I've been given a new domain in my new role right now. And as I'm learning this new domain, there are also a lot of the changes to the teams, right? And kind of like reorganizing, who's working on what, who's doing that and this. And in long term, it's good and potentially can provide better results, like for the team and how they operate and how fast they are in delivering results. But this interim um, state of change is very hard for every team member, for a PM, for everyone. So I think that's been a challenge. And what I learned here is, from the skill perspective, you have to maintain a momentum for the team, and to do that in a way that's suitable depending on the people, etc. To me, it was like not being too serious and kind of like crack a joke, like just have a chat, get a coffee. I'm not saying you have to crack jokes all the time, but I think that's what helps people to stay sane in situations of like just organizational change, I guess. And when some people are very uncertain in terms of like the projects they will work on, or something they've been working on for 5 years that might change all of a sudden. So I think that was both a challenge and a learning experience to kind of like be that person who can still be positive, I guess, in the middle of all of this, when you can feel differently inside. But for the team, if you want to be like a leader, if you want to help them go through that and keep the momentum going, I think that was a big one for me.
Yeah, that's exciting and scary at the same time. For me, I mean, I just started this job like 3 months ago, so I'm just generally excited about every stupid thing. But at the same time, I think so. I've been a B2B PM for a long time, and now at Asana, Asana's been a B2C organization for a very long time, and now they're trying to become a better enterprise company. And one of the reasons I was attracted to this job is because it had like B2C foundation, and they're trying to become a better B2B organization, a product organization. I was like, great, I know a little bit, I don't know a little bit. I can be comfortable and uncomfortable at the same time, keep providing value and keep learning new things. And that's sort of kind of already happening. So that's like the exciting part of it, that I think I'm gonna be a part of, like, a shift for the entire organization, probably the market, definitely our users. And there's going to be a real shift in the way we prioritize, define, and implement stuff, and also the kind of features we do. So that's exciting. What's a little bit scary with that is because there's a lot of focus and there's like real dollar values associated with things. They're being really aggressive about it. Like there's like an X million dollar target on like every team, and I've like 8 engineers on the team, which is the most engineers I've ever worked with, and I'm like, shit, like we got to find out work for like 8 people, and we got to find good work for 8 people. There's so much work that we can do. Yes, like I know 7 features that we can build right now, but everything requires product input, design input, data input, research input. And there's only going to be a 1 PM and 1 designer, like kind of, chugging along everything. So that's like the challenging part. It's like just finding, like, synthesizing like those problems into good feature work for the team, and to keep that momentum up, like exactly like you said, Olha, like is something that's kind of a new muscle for me right now with the newness of everything. Yeah, I mean, we generally just tend to figure it out by the end of the sprint every time, but it's always like a little bit giddy every Friday morning when we go in and talk about, okay, what are we going to do next sprint? Yeah.
So I'll throw in some ideas that's a little bit different, just because of where I'm sitting. I'm not necessarily in a product leader seat or product manager seat, 100% of the time anymore. But what's neat about what my career has evolved into, and having my corporate side of my career and my academic side of my career, is that I've seen, and kind of harking back to that what we talked about the last 5-10 years, there's so much visibility in product management, or on product management. What I've realized is there's this big gap in the corporate world and how we source and support and develop product talent, and all of the new talent that is now coming out into the world, right? When I was, getting into product, and I actually have a really interesting poll going right now on LinkedIn about how many years were you into your career before you got your first product manager role? At this point, the data is like 6 to 7% of people got their very first role as product, and almost all of them have started their career in the last 6 to 8 years, right? In other words, that was never a thing, right? I started in marketing, other people started in engineer. It just wasn't an entry level first job in product management, and for some good reasons. But the corporate world hasn't caught up yet. Programs in amazing academic institution is now teaching product management, that people are starting their careers with the base of knowledge that could start in product management. The corporate world still is requiring a lot of experience, right? If you look at any of the job specs out there, even for associate product manager or early product manager, it's like, yeah, we want 5 years of experience. Like, come on. So there's what I'm doing and what I'm looking at a little bit through Johns Hopkins and a lot through my corporate lens is figuring out how to fill that gap, right? Because I think the corporate world is missing out on amazing, unbiased talent, right? We bring in preconceived baggage when we move from role to role, while still taking advantage of some of the good things that come in, right? The business acumen, the understanding. So the interesting thing to me is over the next 10 years, we're going to have more and more people starting their careers in product. And that's going to be a good thing, in my opinion, but it's also going to take academic institutions, programs, and the corporate kind of balance of supporting those folks. And again, as we've mentioned, it's not an easy role. So how do we put some foundation under them and support under them while they're starting those first few years of their career?
Oh, that's fascinating. And absolutely relevant, right? To anybody and everyone who's interested in becoming a product manager, any of our attendees. And this is important information and also a mindset to have when they approach their roles and so on and so forth. So I have 2 questions that have been asked so far. For the attendees, if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A section so we can get to it. Oh, there you go, more. So let's start with the Q&A part of it. And one of them is something that we were talking about earlier, Jigar, and this says, how do you see the exponential growth of Gen AI affecting the roles of a PM? And how would you leverage the new tech for your role?
That's a good question. I want to break it down into 2 buckets. I'm really curious about like what Ola and JJ also think about this. I think there's like a marketing level to this, where like every company wants to do AI stuff, and then there's some real implementation that certain industries and companies can actually do with Gen AI. And I've seen a little bit of both. Like, I've been in at my previous role, like I did feel that like, it was more of like, just make sure that we do something Gen AI so that we can get that blog post out. And there's hundreds of companies out there that's like, guilty of doing that. Don't want to get into like how right or wrong that is, or like, is it a good way to spend their resources? Even that situation did require a lot of the PMs in the organization to at least start understanding what AI and ML is about and just start speaking the Gen AI language. Fast forward to like today, where in Asana, we are building products with AI built in, and like a few weeks ago, we got this like strategy brief where like, every team has an AI nudge now, which I really love the way they're doing it. But like, they're like, just go ahead and like build your general things, like whatever you're supposed to build, you're good at like figuring that out. But just keep in mind that AI is a tool, and like, we have 50 AI engineers and a group of experts internally who can help you out with that. And this gives like, the right people, like the right PMs who are pseudo experts in that domain to actually pick up the skill and actually implement, AI features. So that's been exciting. So I'm really excited for that. Kind of trying to like answer the question head on, like, is the role changing? Are PMs expected to know that? In a lot of industries and relevant tech stack, yes. How would you leverage the new tech? It's a new technology. It's very similar to like 5 other technologies that we saw in the last 10 years. We just need to embrace it, have a learning perspective, be ruthlessly proactive, communicate, seek out the experts. JJ said earlier on that, like, we don't have to do everything by ourselves. We need to find the right people who can do the jobs well, persuade them, and you can find those experts internally and or externally. So I think it can be like anything from like getting a course on like Coursera to like finding a friend who knows what AI is. And I've done a little bit of both, and like Sana has been nice, and they have like an internal team. So yeah, I mean, I think like I'm just being on top of the trend and just trying to read and learn more about the technology. And when the time's right, like we'll just find the right people. We'll roll up our sleeves and figure that out. That's the mentality that I have about it right now. But I do think that it's just a new important skill, at least for the next 2 to 5 years, until we figure out like how this technology is going to shape things. Just be on top of it, be aware of it. Like when I was starting out, crypto was a new thing. You can't say crypto, you say blockchain for the right reasons. And just know what that is. It's a distributed ledger. I knew that, and I had those conversations, and I became a PM in fintech with no experience in finance, and it was great. And now it's Gen AI stuff. So just stick to the basics, and we'll all figure that out together.
Well, how do you see that being used or as a topic of interest in your role at Fanatics as well? In
Yeah,
JJ,
I think
well, same question.
Yeah, I think like every other company, everyone tries to embrace Gen AI. I think so. We're doing the same, in some specific domains at Fanatics that makes more sense. But if we're talking about the PM role, right, and how internally you're trying to leverage that, I mean, obviously PMs do have to write a lot of documents. You have to be very detailed oriented, maintain a track of like all the decision makers, all the small little things that no one thinks about, but you do. And so I think with that, some of the tools on the market can help you, right? Summarizing the information, maybe, sending a quick update. Or I think for me, it was helpful to do some quick data queries, for example, right? Like I don't need to like spend 30 minutes to figure out like an SQL query or something like that. I can just give it a blurb and like I'll get the data, and it will help me to get stuff done faster. So I think there's definitely some operational overhead that this can handle, but exponentially, I think it all needs to start with a problem, specifically for product management. What problem can this tool or technology solve? Because for now, yes, it can help with a bunch of small things here and there, but the PM, as we just discussed, the skill set, etc., is so diverse, and like the decision making, right? That like the AI cannot make a decision for you or account for everything. You have to explicitly write everything out, and it would take forever to write everything and put it on a paper and organize it. So I think that's why PMs are faster. For now, we'll see how the technology develops. It's definitely exciting, but I would say we're still around. No one's letting us go yet in favor of Gen AI.
Right. And I was at a conference in Zurich like a month ago, a few weeks ago, and a lot of the talk was AI. It was a product management festival. If anybody knows, it's a really great conference, global conference. But a lot of the talks were on AI, right, and the impact. And one interesting thing, and I can't remember which talk it was, but they were talking about how this is kind of the third big technology over the last few decades. And interestingly enough, my career spans that look. And so it was like the internet in the early 2000s, mobile, and then now AI. And to both Jigar and Olha's point, we've got to look at it of product, like how can we use it to build better products, and then how can we use it to help our craft of product management. And same thing happened with the internet. Like a lot of people tried to build products, and then we had the .com bubble, where people just built stuff because it was a cool technology. Mobile, in some ways as well. But looking back over the big picture, made a huge change in the world. This is going to make a huge change in the world. I see it, and again, from a product perspective, all of the same product principles. If we're not solving a problem, it's not going to last long. From a craft perspective, I actually think it is going to have a big, big impact on us. I don't think it's going to displace us. I think it will actually make us more focused on some of the important parts of our roles that sometimes gets mired or forgotten when we get mired in the minutia. I think some of the, just literally writing user stories, which can take weeks, of time. Maybe we get a head start with some things, and then we have to put our human hat on, right, and make some changes as needed. As Olha mentioned, the summaries of just the meetings we have and the decision journals that can be created without spending hours of time. I mean, there's just so many things that I think can improve our experience as product managers, and then ultimately, keep everyone in kind of in the loop and in the knowledge of things. And so I don't think we know exactly how that's going to impact us, but I have really high hopes that it's going to help us do a lot of the things that we do today in an even better way, and then free up some of our time to focus more on the more high touch human things.
I tried something interesting the other day. I wrote down a product spec and I just pasted it on ChatGPT and asked it, what did I miss? And it gave me 5 things. 4 of them were nonsense, but one of them made sense. So,
right,
which is great.
Yeah, I love
it.
It is great. So that's okay. You do that, and then you got something, right? We as humans know that for the 4 were nonsense. Fine, you just put those out, but you actually got a good idea from it, right? And so that to me is a good example of some things that it can do. It can help, and I'm excited about it. I think it's gonna be really, really neat for our craft.
Yeah. Great answers, and I agree. I'm excited to see where it goes, and I think it's going to impact not just product management but our lives in general, and I'm excited about it as well. So there are 2 questions that are surrounding tools. They're saying, what are tools that are must know for a product manager, and then do you have suggestions for tool to manage product roadmap or more strategically its life cycle?
Well, I'll just throw some ideas in there. So I use particular brands, and everybody does, but I mean, I think something to like a whiteboarding solution, because we're virtual or remote for the most part. So you just simply have to have something to keep capturing ideas and do that brainstorming that we all used to do in person around a whiteboard. Sometimes we still do, that sort of thing. Something to capture all of your, user, just manage the backlog. I mean, that's just whatever it's going to be. Then some, no code tools like, again, Figma or lots of others that, just can kind of visualize what you're doing. One thing, back to the AI question, that I think may be kind of a cool upgrade of us is a lot of folks, as we're communicating ideas, we used to do like simple little sketches and mock-ups, and now we can do that in such better ways. Even Gen AI can create a picture of a persona, right? And we can literally like watch a video of something, as opposed to just that. So I mean, I think some of those generic tools are the ones that, anything that helps us organize our thoughts and our kind of cross-functional thoughts, and then helps us communicate.
Yeah, I think definitely, like, a whiteboarding tool. There's definitely going to be like, one tool that your company prefers. How you talk to engineers. It's going to be Jira, or it's going to be Asana, or it's going to be like, a couple other products. But I think they're basically the same kind of tools at the backbone of it. I don't think there's any value in like calling out these brand names and like figuring out like what's important, or like what's cool and whatnot. But one of like, I think there's also like data visualization tools that are really important. Like, we need to bring those into the question. That there's things like Looker, Power BI, and Tableau, and again, you don't need to learn all of them, but I think just having some more familiarity with one of those tools is important. For road mapping, there's so much out there. There's AHA, there's Product Plan, there's like 4 other. Again, there's Asana, shameless plug. So you just go in and like, just go in and like use a product and like figure out the template. And you should be good. And like, these are like, it's a really crowded space. Certain companies do certain things right, and leadership, wherever you end up working, is going to decide the tools that you engage with. So you should just know the backbone and try things. And if you just, if you just want to be open-ended, just use Notion or use Figma or Miro for everything, and you're fine. There's plenty of options out there. I'd rather like suggest spend time on other things, honestly.
I agree with everything. I would just say, whiteboarding tools that are very like flexible in terms of what you can do with it. One in particularly that I like is Lucid. That allows you to either, build like system diagrams, so only also applicable like for tech and like engineers prefer to use it. And then you can also build a product roadmap there. So it's just a universal thing. And I agree, yeah, whatever your company uses, just make it work for you, that it's not hard to manage, and that's all.
Perfect. So we are almost reaching the end of our fireside chat. I have one question. I know we've touched base, but I want to see if you have anything that we might not have talked about. And that was a question about around the pitfalls of engineers moving into product management. And we talked about the idea of the engineers needing a perfect solution, saying this is the definite answer, and learning to deal with uncertainty. But do you see any other pitfalls that engineers who are trying to move into product need to be aware about or have to work hard to overcome those tendencies?
Just to jump in and kind of reiterate what we've said, number one, soft skills will put you way ahead of anyone. For the record, if I were to do my career over, I would actually get an engineering degree, because I do think that knowledge is important, and to speak the language of all of the people, I do think it is a huge asset. But in lieu of the soft skills, it won't do you any good. It won't do you any good to become a CEO, to keep moving up. Not that everybody wants that, but so it's all about those communication, those understanding people, the empathy, curiosity, relationship, all of those stuff. You just simply have to hone it in yourself. The other thing is you just got to be a business person, right? You've got to understand how your decisions make an impact to the business. The big picture, the small picture, no leader, there's not a single, well, I shouldn't say that, but there shouldn't be a single C-suite leader out there that doesn't understand the business and how it works and how decisions are going to impact that. So that's what I would say.
I think the only thing I'd like to add there is like the difference between the big and the small, the execution and the strategy, the feature and the vision is, and that delta is a lot of things, and depending on who you ask, they're going to tell you different things. Like the engineering manager is going to tell you they need a product plan and something project management-y there. If you ask the CPO, they're going to be, that's my roadmap. Like my roadmap is going to answer that, but it doesn't always ideally do that. I think it requires like, all the skills that we spoke about right now, and then a little bit of a leap of faith. Like that leap of faith is something that I suspect is not something that engineering always, teaches you. Like I've been an engineer, and that like leap of faith is never factored in, except some chapters in math, like or when you're like
Probabilities.
studying, I don't know, like
yeah.
But generally that leap of faith is never accounted for. But that's a very real life thing, and like just having the ability to like factor that in, be okay with that, be right as much as you can in those decisions, and communicate that leap of faith well, because I think like one of the things that I'm trying to figure out, and hope I hope that I really want to get better at that, is like how do I communicate that leap of faith better, because even that's like an unknown, and I get a lot of questions about that, and I guess I'll figure that out. But I think that is also a very important part, and like I think if engineers want to become good PMs, they should just keep getting more and more comfortable with leap of faith on certain situations, not having enough information, and yeah, just hold yourself together and be comfortable in those uncomfortable areas.
Yeah. Olha, any thoughts?
I agree with all of the above, honestly, and I think engineers are biased, in terms of here's a problem, let's go build this, but you just cannot imagine how many other people, domains, etc., who are impacted by your change. So I was just like hesitating to build, just at first solution that comes to mind, and prioritizing, like checking, double checking, your thought process, your impact that it makes on other teams would be a great help. Not that it's a pitfall or anything, but it's just naturally what people like to do. You see a problem, you want to build a solution. But as PMs, we have to be super careful if that's the right solution to the problem, or even further, if it's the right problem to solve, and if the business needs to solve this problem anyway.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I think that's all we have time for. I know we've run over, so I want to thank you all of you for joining us as a panelist, taking the time to share your experience, your expertise, and your knowledge on product management. I hope this fireside chat was useful. If you have any other questions, is it okay if our attendees connect with you on LinkedIn if they want to continue the conversation? Perfect.
Absolutely.
I will, if you haven't already seen the LinkedIn profiles, I'll share them with you again at the end of this. And thank you again for all the attendees and to all the panelists for joining us. This was a fascinating chat, and I hope to see you guys again pretty soon. Take care and have
Thank
a great
you.
weekend, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.